Hey guys, welcome back to Home Finders, a podcast by Property Finder, where you can learn all the ins and outs of the real estate sector. I'm your host, Scott Bond, and this week is dedicated to anyone who's thinking about investing in the property in the UAE. Today, we're going to be diving into all the legal aspects around buying property, from property taxes to inheritance and more. And joining us to help make sense of this legal jargon is Arash Zad, the founder and leading lawyer at the Zad Law Firm. Welcome to the show, Arash.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So one of the things I want to start with is the Golden Visa program. As we know, there's been some evolutions to it from when it was first announced to today. Help us to understand the basics. What is a Golden Visa?
So Golden Visa, initially when it was introduced, were given to certain individuals, celebrities or people who did an amazing job or amazing or exceptional work in the UAE. And as far as I recall, it was only for 5 years. And then later on, they changed it to 10 years. Golden Visa is a long-term residence visa that will allow you to live in the country, work, and sponsor your family, basically without the need of having a sponsor.
And you've mentioned some of the great benefits, but are there more benefits that I should be thinking about in terms of obtaining a Golden Visa?
The first thing I tell my clients are this, that when you have a Golden Visa, you will be released from renewing it every 2 or 3 years. Yeah, so you have it for the period of 10 years, which is amazing. The other benefit is that, as I mentioned, you don't need a sponsor. Normally, when you are applying for a residence visa in the UAE, you're either an employee, your company should be your sponsor, or you're a business partner. Again, your company should sponsor you. With this type of visa, you don't need a sponsor. One of the amazing benefits is this, that especially this is very good for businessmen, that they travel a lot and they stay outside the country for a longer period. The normal visas, if you stay outside the country for more than 6 months, then your visa will be invalid. Then you have to come back and reapply. With a Golden Visa, there is no time frame for that. You can stay as long as you want.
It sounds like peace of mind is really one of the main benefits.
Is.
So you don't have to worry about renewal. You don't have to worry about what if you leave the country for a while. And that leads us to, obtaining it. We also know that you can earn it through investment in real estate.
Right.
Tell us a little bit more about some of the requirements there.
So if you own a property or group of properties worth 2 million and above, and it's a fully paid property, then you can apply for a Golden Visa through a real estate investment. If you have a property that you purchased it through a mortgage, then the amount that you have paid through the bank, it should be at least 2 million dirhams. Then you will be qualified to apply.
Yeah. And what else? What else should we know about the Golden Visa program? Are there any other processes or requirements that I need to go through in order to obtain one?
It's a very easy process. It might take a bit time to get the approval and be processed, but you can do it in 2 different ways. You can either do it online through the immigration website, or you can go to AMR centers, the customer happiness centers, and you can physically visit them and do it.
Okay, so now that we've covered all things Golden Visa and this amazing benefit that you have, specifically as we think about real estate and property investment, as we know, the market has been incredibly hot over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, and doesn't really seem to be any slowing down either, which makes your business amazing as well. But what are some of the pieces of advice that you give to investors or buyers here in the UAE market? Maybe to avoid any of the common pitfalls or mistakes that they may make when investing in real estate?
Great question, by the way, because see, when the market is booming and everybody's talking about Dubai and the real estate of Dubai, obviously it attracts so many attentions from overseas. There are people that they hear about Dubai and they receive this information that, okay, how beneficial or how secure the real estate industry is in Dubai. So they will become interested into investing in Dubai as well. So for those people that they are not familiar with the culture, they are not familiar with the laws and regulations, number one, I would suggest to them that they need to make themselves fully aware of laws and regulations in the UAE. They might have invested in so many properties outside, but they're not familiar with what we have here. Normally, what I do with my clients, especially with the ones that they contact me from overseas, I take them through the whole legal procedure, what needs to be done, what are the things that they have to always keep in mind before making any investments. So we guide them basically through those procedures. Just to name few here is this, that if you are buying a property, of course, you're buying through a real estate company. So they have to make sure that the real estate company that they are dealing with, they are professional. Brokers that they are getting in touch with them, they are registered. And the properties that they are purchasing, if they are buying from a secondary market, there are so many things that they need to check. For example, the ownership documents, etc. And if they feel that everything is clear, there is no doubt, they get their documents checked, their contracts, their MOUs, everything has to be vetted and approved by a counselor, and then only step into an investment.
Well, and I have to imagine too that your advice becomes so important for those first-time buyers here in the market or out-of-town buyers who are investing in the market, because there are so many unknowns. And on top of it too, if you're not dealing with an agency that might have that high level of trust and transparency, which is why we introduce super agents, it becomes really important to make sure you have all those answers. So I imagine your advice becomes really important for these customers who just don't know where to begin.
It's very important to start before investing. There are clients that they come to us after they purchased and now they're facing problem. So they skip the prevention part of it, right? So if they come at the earlier stages, it's much better and it's more cost effective for them as well, because we can put them in the right channel so that they will not have any issues in the future. And then their investment will be as secure as possible.
Yeah, it's great advice, because we tell people to start with mortgage at the beginning of their search, right? Before you get too deep into the process.
Here we go.
But starting with some of the real estate advice from a lawyer's point of view, I think is really important for people to keep in mind. You also mentioned secondary housing and, if you're buying through the secondary market, but we're seeing the off-plan market become a much bigger player right now in the purchases that are being made. What kind of advice do you have when thinking about buying off-plan as opposed to buying secondary?
See, off-plan has its own risks associated with it, because you are buying something that does not exist yet, and it has to be completed in due course. So one of the things that people sometimes they face problem is the discrepancy between what they have purchased and what was handed over by the developer. So as a small margin of differences is acceptable by the law, but anything more than that has to be compensated. Again, when you are purchasing an off-plan property, there is always the chance of the developer not being able to complete the project. Although I have to mention here that the government did an amazing job in securing as much as possible all the off-plan projects. There are so many security layers in place that makes it as safe as possible for investors.
And what about out-of-town investors? You've mentioned the work that you do with a lot of foreign investors that don't live here. And by the way, they maybe never even come to the UAE, but they're investing here in the UAE. How are you helping support them, or what different piece of advice are you giving them as opposed to investors who might live here in the country?
So when they are not in the country, there are so many risks involved that, number one, they're not here to see everything up close and personal, to monitor or supervise the procedure. Therefore, they have to rely on someone who is, number one, aware about the situation or the regulations, and they're trustworthy. So you cannot just assign or appoint a real estate agent who you have never met, who you don't know personally, and just give them a power of attorney to handle everything for you while you're outside the country. In any country, you will find some people that they are not as honorable as they should be. Okay, so by having a power of attorney, so many things could go wrong. So if you are appointing someone, you have to be able to trust that person. And then that person should be savvy enough to secure your transaction, to be fully aware of the regulations and how the real estate transfer happens or takes place. These are the things that they need to keep in mind always.
And among the many great pieces of advice that you've already shared with our viewers today is, starting at the beginning of the process with some of this advice, but also what about due diligence? That seems to be something that tends to be an afterthought for people as well. What role does that play? And maybe what advice do you give on due diligence?
Number one, due diligence, I would say that they have to make sure about the broker that they are working with. So brokers, they have to be professional enough. They have to be registered with Dubai Land Department. They have to have a broker ID to show that they have been trained, they have been registered, and they're qualified. Real estate company, of course, as well. Work with reputable people that they didn't just show up last month in the city. They've been here around and they have worked, they have experience, and they know everything. Number two is due diligence about the seller. If you are buying from the secondary market, make sure that you understand that this person actually exists. The ownership document is valid. The title deed and everything is legit. Make sure about all that. The MOU that you are signing, it has to be vetted. You have to make sure, because that's the only piece of document that will protect you in the secondary market. Okay, that you need to make sure that every single line is understandable and in line with what you have in mind. So these are the things, in my opinion, they have to keep in mind.
I imagine from all your years of practicing law here in the country, you have some scary stories.
We don't want to get there.
I can't imagine you want to go into them, but I can just imagine, the challenges that you've learned about. But it is some simple things sometimes, right? Just making sure that, you're verifying or validating. And I have to imagine people jump quickly into real estate because it is an emotional decision for people at the end of the day.
It is. Yeah. But the good thing is that the government made sure that even for those emotional buyers, they make it as secure as possible. For example, there are countries, I was talking to some of the clients the other day, they were telling me that in our countries, even if we have a title deed, that is useless because there could be that the seller has already sold these properties to multiple buyers, okay? And then he shows up at your door and he sells that property to you and takes the money and runs away. And then when you go and see the validity of this title deed, it's not valid. And there is no way to understand this. Right now, for us, the title deed has a barcode, or the QR code. You just scan it and you see that where you're at. This title deed is valid or no. It's very, very secure right now. Still, the government can go up to a certain level, The rest is on us to make sure that, like any other investment, we have to do our own due diligence. We cannot just expect everything from the government and the country.
Well, and you're lucky, and you're right. We are lucky here where we live that, real estate has been prioritized to make it safe, and which is why we're seeing so much, foreign investment that's coming in, why we're seeing the population grow. And, another big part of those buyers coming in, you think about where do I come up with my down payment at? Inheritance is an area that I think we should cover. How does it work here in the UAE when we think about inheritance to cover my down payment or, my source of funds? Tell us a little bit more about that concept.
The inheritance?
Yes.
So the inheritance law here, as per the UAE law, if a foreigner has a property in the UAE, and passes away, if they don't have a will in place, the Sharia law will apply. The Sharia law is the Islamic law, the law based on the religion. Okay, it has its own sets of rules. Foreigners, they're not aware about the details of this law. However, if they don't have any will, unfortunately, this law will be applicable to their case, which in most cases, they're not happy with that. So that's why we normally advise our clients, the moment they decide about purchasing a property, we always encourage them to have a will in place. So what happens in practice is that when a person passes away, the legal heirs will or can request the judge to use the law of their deceased country and deal with the property according to that law, provided that has been already stipulated in the will. Wow. So the person will say, if I die, the law of UK will apply. The law of the United States will apply. And then the legal heirs can use that in their favor. Otherwise, the Sharia law will apply.
Yeah. Well, we're learning a lot today. We're glad that you're here to help our,
I'm happy to hear
our
that.
consumers to be able to understand this, because I have to imagine there's a lot of people that get very surprised by that. And another aspect too, I'm sure people don't understand always, is tax considerations. What kind of advice should somebody be thinking about when they're buying a property for an investment or use when it comes to any tax considerations here?
So right now we have VAT, the value added tax, which is 5%. And individuals who have residential properties, they don't need to pay any tax. It only applies to commercial properties. So if they are selling or renting their commercial properties, then 5% tax will be involved. Corporate tax, still not in place. It will be implemented very soon. And it's a bit gray area of the law. So there are so many details that still needs to be clarified. But so far, there is no corporate tax for individuals. Foreigners foreign companies and foreign companies that they are not resident in the UAE, there will be a corporate tax on their property income. So I would rather not to discuss this right now because, again, there could be so many changes by the time. But this is the bigger picture now.
Okay, so you've shared a lot of great advice today. And I have to imagine for the average consumer who's listening, they're thinking about calling you long before they get into this process. Do the majority of the people call you then, or do they call you after maybe they've already got into some trouble?
Unfortunately, after. That's sad. And the reason is that it's much easier and less costly if they contact us prior to entering into their investment. Because when things goes wrong, then there are so many costs involved, not only our fee, there will be court fees, expert fees, etc., etc. So I would always advise investors, get in touch, get your lawyer sorted, speak with them, get a consultation, let them examine your documents, and then only make your investment, because it's going to save you a lot of costs, which is unnecessary, to be honest.
Well, as I mentioned, you've taught us a lot today. And if I've taken away any one big piece of advice, it's if I'm going to buy or rent here in the UAE, I'm going to call you first just to make sure that I've covered all my grounds, and it'll be cheaper on the upfront as well. But I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your great knowledge and information, from the Golden Visa all the way to, buying off plan versus secondary. And of course, just any other information we need to help keep us safe when making investments in this wonderful country. So thank you again for joining me today. It's been wonderful to have you here on as a guest.
Appreciate you.
Thank you again for joining me. Thank you.
My pleasure.